You know, at times we take for granted how supportive and accessible Governor Gianforte is to the citizens of Montana, and especially the business community. It is truly an honor to not only co-host this event with him, but to have him invite his friends to be part of the summit. What a privilege it is to invite on stage Governor Gianforte, Mark Gordon of Wyoming, Governor Jim Pellin of Nebraska, and Jennifer Gonzalez Colon of Puerto Rico. Please welcome all of our governors.
Well, hello again. What a great discussion this morning. I was really impressed by the panelists, and again, thank you all for being here. I'm pleased to be joined by some of my favorite governors, and Jennifer, thank you for traveling all the way from Puerto Rico to be here with us. We really appreciate it.
I'm happy to be here. Nobody told me about the jeans policy. I have mine in the hotel, and even the boots.
Jennifer and I served on natural resources. We sat next to each other back in Congress before you became governor, and I became governor out here. So it's great to be with you. Of course, Jim Pillin from Nebraska and Mark Gordon from Wyoming. I think we're going to have a good discussion. Whether it's all of the above, energy strategy, or just being closer to the people, it's important. States can make better decisions related to energy than bureaucrats 2,000 miles away. So that's what we want to focus on. I will say that my fellow governors would agree, we've seen unprecedented engagement from the Trump administration since he came in, totally night and day considering the prior administration, and that's helping us. So we want to make best use of that access to advance energy policy in our states. So I'm going to start off with a general question for everybody. How do you define energy leadership at the state or territorial level, and what principles guide your administration in that pursuit of energy leadership?
That's going to be me. First of all, thank you. I'm happy to be here. And I believe from all the states and territories, Puerto Rico is the worst case in terms of baseload energy. That's our main problem right now because of the hurricanes in the past, earthquakes, and the lack of maintenance to the system for years. Add to that bankruptcy in the operator of the system. So when I arrived in January of this year as a governor, actually I ran for governor because of the electricity costs on the island and the baseload and the situation with energy on the island as well. So one of the first things, and I believe that that's leadership, when I was in Congress with Jan, we secured more than $18 billion to fix the energy grid on the island. The money is not being used still. It was approved under the Trump administration, made available in 2020, and during the last 4 years, we were playing around with DOE, with HUD, with FEMA on where and how to use it. Most of the funds were for renewables, not exactly for our main problem that was the baseload energy situation. So I define that leadership in first, renewing our generation system. I need to lower the cost. We are right now in 6 cents more than the average of states in terms of electricity, and we need to lower that cost. And the second one, which is the most important one, we cannot have 27 hours a year of interruption of service when the media in the US is almost 2 hours. When I got in office, they told me in a report that I was going to have up to 36 days without power during the summer. Thanks God, we added 12,000 new megawatts to the system, just fixing the old grids and old generation plants. So I will say, get a good use of the taxpayers' money, accelerating permitting process on the island. I've been doing that by executive orders. I'm taking into advantage everything the Trump administration and Secretary Wright has done. And I will say Puerto Rico should be the showcase of how American energy dominance can be on the island, because during the last 4 years, it was all renewables. And I don't have anything against renewables, but when you get an island that depends on the generation and manufacturing, 43% of the economy of Puerto Rico is manufacturing, is medical devices, pharmaceutical, electronics, among many others. If we don't have power, we cannot produce, we cannot export. So they were taking us as the lab for batteries and renewables, and we cannot afford that to run a pharmaceutical company 24/7. So I will say, taking the leadership to lower the cost, have a better generation, and cut the vegetation that is not being done in the right-of-way of all transmission lines. So we do have a real problem with our transmission operator, not with the Generation 1, and adding LNG as a source. 62% of our generation in Puerto Rico is petroleum. And then just 24% LNG, and then you got coal, 6%, and the less than one is renewables. So the cost of living, because of electricity prices on the islands are higher to a general poor population. So I will say that cutting permits, cutting the red tape, and using the resources at the federal level. And I want to take this opportunity to thank Secretary Wright and the executive orders of President Trump since January, because we've been taking advantage of those to cut all the permitting regarding EPA, regarding vegetation. Our main problem, NEPA, to get a lot of things done. It's ridiculous. If the Army Corps of Engineers put a plan on the island, a generation plan, and they trespass that to the government, we need to take and find new permits, because now the owner is the government, when it was done by the American government itself. So I will say my main burden is NEPA and all those processes in getting prices down.
And if I remember correctly, Jennifer, the hurricanes that you saw destroyed much of your transmission.
Yes.
What lessons have you learned from the rebuilding of the transmission since then?
Transmission lines, we were the last customer to recover power on the island after Hurricane Irma and Maria in 2017 was 11 months. So just imagine, up to 11 months. In my own house, it was 6 months to get full power back. So people is beginning to live with generators. But you cannot afford to live on diesel and generators all the time. So that brought us another problem. EPA permits to use generators for 24/7. You cannot do that. So I will say we still are in the path of that recovery. Even when the Trump administration approved the largest amount of federal dollars by FEMA, by DOE, and HUD to reconstruct the generation and the transmission on the island, the money is not being used. It's been available since 2020, and all the permits, all the processes, all the red tape from the federal government, DOE to HUD to FEMA, and then the local permits as well are limiting that access to those resources. The last thing the Secretary Wright did is it was redirecting $365 million. Instead of using it for solar panels for 800 customers, we asked him to redirect that money to fixing the grid and to fixing the plants, and we did. So now we are impacting, and we added up to 400 megawatts just because of redirecting the funds to shovel-ready projects. So I will say, literally, we're still in the path of recovery. We have not fixed our grid or our transmission lines.
Jim, what does energy leadership look like in Nebraska, and what principles guide you?
Well, thank you, Greg. Thanks for being here. Thanks for putting this together. It's really important for me to say that two guys to my left, when the life happens that you become governor, and never in a gazillion years would my family have ever thought this happened, and most of my best friends still can't believe it, that I'm governor. But people reach out, and these guys are practical, pragmatic, and just good people that have said, hey, let us help you any way you can. So really, really grateful for that and our friendship. And we have a lot of governors that are just pragmatic. They're serving to make a difference, not play what I call goober politics. So I'm really grateful for all of our colleagues. I think that a couple things was maybe I think we all can remember things that when we're in our first days where we were shocked. Almost 3 years ago, I was in transition, and so I became shocked because 3 years ago, if you kind of move the clock back and think, how many people had conversations about electricity? There were none that I had heard of, and in transition then started finding out, gee whiz, we have opportunities to grow businesses and the power source and limitations. So that really got my attention. We have an extraordinary advantage in the state of Nebraska. We are public power. We're the only state in the United States of America that's public power. Tom Kent, who's CEO of NPPD, which would be about 65% of it, is here. Tom's a nuclear engineer, taught at Navy. He special guy. We work a ton together. So I think maybe the first piece would just simply leadership is collaboration, working together. So everybody with public power that we're all together on it. We're working on to solve it. And I think the other piece would be really understanding who we are as a state. And so this is kind of funny, kind of appropriate. Just 2 days ago, I always love to ask, what's the one thing you love the most about Nebraska? And we're getting people to understand to say, it's the people. And then a person said, what's the worst thing? And somebody that moved to Nebraska said, the wind. The wind's the worst thing. So it blows. We have a lot of wind in Nebraska. So we are about 35% wind in Nebraska. We're right at under 20% nuclear power. And then we're about 40% coal. So I think that, again, I think we're all incredibly grateful for President Trump and his administration and the extraordinary cabinet members of working together. And, 3 years ago, there was nobody that was courageous or bold enough to say, we need to expand coal. We need to keep coal going. We're working very hard to make sure North Omaha has plants that are planned to be shut down by a elected board in OPPD. So working hard to make sure that doesn't happen, extend the shelf life of what we have, and then say, how can we grow? Really proud we were able to get money through the administration, and Tom's team is working. I think we've met with 17 different communities for nuclear power. And maybe the last thing is saying, how can we really have an impact at the federal level with the permitting? I love going back in 1953, right, was the first nuclear reactors we had for submarines and in the Navy. And it's kind of like what happened in the ethanol industry. As the ethanol industry grew, which is gigantic in Nebraska, ethanol, we're about food, we're about the people, water, food, fuel, and electricity. And so 1953 is the first nuclear reactors for our Navy, running ships and running submarines. In 1968, Nebraska got a permit to do a nuclear power plant, and it was operational in 1974. Just think of that timeline and think we've got to be bold and say, if we could do it 60 years ago, 70 years ago, what on earth is wrong with us? So I think that's the other one. We've just got to all stand up and say, we want to buy a ton of Mark's coal so we can expand coal production in Nebraska, because again, we have to make sure.
Montana has more coal than Wyoming.
Yeah, and I know you do, but it's freight, right? It's close. So I think those are things that are really important, that as leaders that we use common sense and we're bold and courageous to say what sometimes people don't want. It's hard to believe that just a couple of years ago we were being duped into thinking we need to have electric car generators. How did that ever make sense?
Mark, what about Wyoming?
Well, thanks, Greg. It's really great to be here, and Montana and Wyoming have worked together a lot of things, and actually Nebraska too, Puerto Rico, a little further away, but I think what you've got up here are governors. So I just want to give you a couple of principles. I grew up on a ranch, and you really wanted to sort of see what the problem was. You wanted to identify what the resources you had were, and then you wanted to go about doing it as best you can. So if you lay that out for this part of the country, what you're going to find is that we need power, and we just talked a lot about baseload power. That's something I think everybody up here has been talking about for a long time. And then I think you need to talk about how much we love the country that we're in, and I think you need to talk about how much we enjoy recreating and how beautiful this place that we live is. So every coal miner I know, every oil and gas worker, and I was one of those. I worked for Apache. In fact, we had some oil and gas in the eastern part of Montana. I can remember going back a long time ago. I don't know how many people in this room remember Arrow. Anybody remember AERO? Alternative Energy Research Organization that was here in Montana that was talking back in the 1980s about renewables. So, you know, we've gone through a large range of things, and we talk about all of the above, and I've been a big supporter of that. Doug Bergen was a big supporter, Greg, Jim, you have been as well. But I'm going to reflect on the fact that it really is best of the above. It's best of all of the above. And the reason I say that is if you've seen the perversion that's been put into the market for wind, now wind has a place, that's true, but if you look at what it's done to some of our landscapes, and it was all driven by tax policy, and it all drove the grid into a situation that it really couldn't deal with particularly well. At the same time that we were putting our foot on the neck of coal, and you know, I'll go back to Obama saying, if we can put a man on the moon, we can certainly learn how to develop a coal process that will allow us to burn coal cleanly. Now you have Trump saying beautiful, clean coal, so finally we have a continuity there. But I think you're going to find in governors a real practical sense of how we solve problems. So, you know, Wyoming, we export a tremendous amount of energy. And yesterday, I brought my notes up from a thing that we did yesterday. From the point of view of leadership, it is about courage. It is about imagination. It is reflecting the fact that we're not going to go into the future by regulating ourselves. We're going to go into the future by innovating. And so when we have regulation, it ought to be inspirational, and it ought to be about what we expect the outcome to be, not telling you how to do it. So I'm just going to step back and say yesterday, it's kind of a thought exercise. We invited everybody from our REAs to our major utilities, to our generators, this behind-the-meter generation, a big topic. We started talking about what is now 3.5 trillion of our GDP, which is all the data centers. The size of those, we just talked about one yesterday, but that last week, that is going to use more power than Wyoming does currently. More power. These are campuses that are going to come. And of course, there's worries about resources and so on. Those need to be solved. In this particular case, this new data center is not going to use water more than 6, count them, 6 restrooms that are in the data center. And you think about President Trump's initiative on AI, you realize how important it is, what data has become. There's a whole group of people that are saying, gosh, we shouldn't be doing this. But the fact of the matter is it's coming. And if we're going to be a great country, we're going to need to have AI. We need to make sure it's well powered, and we need to do that in a way that makes sure our consumers don't absorb the costs. So what we did as a thought exercise is we said, we are struggling. You know, we talked a little bit in the last panel about the flat demand. That is now, you want to talk a hockey stick, take a look at it now at what it's done. The demand, 47% year over year last year, looking at 61% year over year this coming year, just in demand from data centers alone. Someone's got to meet that, and we talked transmission, we talked all the issues that are there. If you go back to the Bush administration, trying to find the rights of way, that's why we had the REAs. Is there a place that we can figure out how to put behind-the-meter generation, conventional generation, renewables, figure out how to do that in a way that we can balance that with demand, and suddenly we know that we have rights of way that are there. So instead of sort of fiddling around with what that old regulatory scheme was, how can we look at that as within the state? And I'm actually saying within the Western region, because there is an incredible opportunity, and I can't believe how exciting it is to be alive in this day. So Greg, I'm really excited about what you're doing here.
Great. A number of you brought this up, federal policy. We have a number of people from our federal delegation here. It's a new day in Washington with President Trump, but I wouldn't say they've removed all the red tape yet. What specific advice would you give to the federal government to get us back to not only energy independence, but on a path to energy dominance? What does the federal government need to do?
I'll give you one quick example, and I'll be short. I'm sorry I talked too long. So the newest being built reactor is in Wyoming, TerraPower, 500 megawatts. It took, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 independent NEPA analysis between the NRC, the EPA, and the Bureau of Land Management. They had to do an analysis so that we could break ground because we didn't want to put a shovel in the ground where they were going to build the nuclear plant. So for the groundbreaking exercise, we had to do that. That is absolutely ridiculous. So I think getting out of our way, and I just want to make that point again, you can regulate by saying, here's what we would like you to do. However you get there, do it. That's cool. That's America. Instead of, oh, best available technology. Greg put this thing on his plant 7 years ago. That seems to be the best that we can do. You've got to do it too. That's nonsense.
I think that there's been an epiphany for me, being governor of Nebraska, how government works. There's one part of government where people will do contracts and say yes to spending and yes to spending and yes to spending. We got to reverse that and say no, no, no. And then there's the part of the government that wants to regulate everything, and they say no to everything, and they got to say yes. Does that make sense? It's just us backwards. And so, you know, the permitting process is an abomination, and so much of it, I was so grateful to hear it when we were in the West Wing, when presidents talked about whacking bureaucracy. We have the challenges. We're working really hard to get people to understand that are working for the government in the state of Nebraska, that you're a public servant, and it's an extraordinary privilege. And if you think you're a bureaucrat, you need to get the heck off the team, because we just cannot maintain being an extraordinary country, extraordinary states, if we got people that are just continuing to create more roadblocks and roadblocks. We have to end the permitting. We have a transmission line we've been trying to build in Nebraska for 11 years called the R line, still has not taken place. Secretary Burgum said, let me know, we've got the people in place. We've got to steamroll the permitting process.
Jennifer, you have some words for the federal government.
I can literally write a book on permitting. I will say that this is the biggest issue on the island. Your states, you got senators, representatives, you got direct access to the federal agencies. I'm a territory. I want to become a state. So double the permitting, double the process, double the bureaucracy. And the first thing that happened in the last 4 years, it was Washington dictating what the island needs. And what that happened? They decided to have Puerto Rico as a laboratory for renewable solar panels, batteries, and I don't have anything against that. But you cannot run an island and businesses and manufacturing and hospitals 24/7 with batteries. You cannot. You cannot have the base load necessary to maintain the island on just that. So they decided to put all the resources just in those projects, using Puerto Rico as a showcase for renewables in the nation. And what happened? It's still 8 years after a hurricane, and we have not resolved a problem. So the first part, President Trump signed on January the 20th, executive orders to the American Dominance Energy. And I did it in April, taking into advantage those executive orders. And we met with the president in February in our meeting with him and with Secretary Wright. And I'll tell you, it's been a shift from the night to the day in terms of how the agencies are working. In my case, the Department of Energy sent a team 8 times already to meet with all stakeholders, with all companies on the island, and ask us directly, what do you need? What should be best of doing here? The second one was EPA. Lee Selden is trying to get that done but then you get some permanent government between the agencies that are not following the executive orders. And even when you got the people at the top in the regional positions or the secretary dictating with executive orders, and we did the same thing back home, I'm cutting permitting. If there's a federal project approved, I waive all local permits because I cannot put those federal dollars in jeopardy because, some processes. We saw that 8 years ago. So I'm cutting that. I appointed SAR Energy, who is in charge of managing with federal agencies and private contractors to get that thing done. Add to that in the case of Puerto Rico, we do have a federal oversight board. That means that all contracts that are measure of $10 million, they need to revise it. So what I did during this summer, I just renegotiated a deal to bring more LNG to the island because I believe in LNG. We need to move forward from petroleum. And I cut from $20 billion to $4 billion contract of LNG on the island. I've been waiting since June to get it approved by this federal board. And in the midterm, the people of the island are paying higher prices of electricity, and we cannot move forward to switch and to switch from from petroleum and other sources of energy to LNG. I believe in American LNG. I extended the coal power on the island. It was set to be finished next year. That was one of my first laws that I approved as a governor. Is the most cheaper one, and the people cannot afford to improvise with energy grid. So I will say, the president and Secretary Wright already extended 2 times the emergency orders in the case of Puerto Rico, and we've been seeing the results of getting generators being fixed, and I hope we can redirect most of the funds that were approved for, pet projects from the last administration. Secretary Granholm went to and I need to say this, Secretary Granholm went to the island 17 times, and they never added new generation power to the island. I may say Secretary Wright has not been to the island yet, but with his executive orders and the work he has done at the Energy Department and the President Trump leadership, we've been fixing that in sooner time. And I hope this is not going to be an issue for the next 3 years.
Okay. I have one more question for the governors, and then we'll open it up to the audience for any questions that you may have. One of the great things of being governor is everyone thinking of investing in your state or territory comes to see you. And I get people to come into my office all the time. I'm curious to know what emerging technologies in the energy space you're seeing that you're particularly excited about.
In my case, we're focusing, my main issue is bringing manufacturing back home. That means reshoring. 43% of the island economy is manufacturing. So we're bringing back. Already, we committed $1 billion in new investment from pharmaceutical and manufacturing back home in these 10 months. That's 3,000 jobs just in manufacturing. We're doing textiles, but our biggest issue is now aerospace, defense. Many people are not aware, defense. We produce many of the defense products for our military, but pharmaceutical. We are bringing back some of the companies that left to Singapore, left to Ireland, left to Costa Rica or Dominican Republic, and those are American jobs that are kept on the island and that maintain the supply chain that we saw it affected after the pandemic. So in that sense, I'm taking into advantage of the tariff President Trump is doing in many of those countries. In some cases, we're even putting cogeneration plants incentives to those companies just to establish them on the island. And we are very aggressive on that. We even named a concierge for those people that are coming to invest and do manufacturing companies on the island. You're gonna have one person dealing with all your permits, all your tax incentive, so you can do it right away.
Good. What energy innovations are you seeing?
The newest that we're really, really excited, I call it second generation ethanol. And we've worked very hard in the last 3 years with an organization called Tallgrass. It's actually for Montanans, you'll be intrigued. Its CEO is a guy named Matt Shea, brother of your new senator. And what is basically taking place is we'll be able to partner with Mark, and we are connecting 18 of our 24 ethanol plants to decarb, to sequester the carbon. What's that mean? Our energy is the most valuable that there is. We will be able to double our ethanol production. We'll go from 40% of our corn crop to roughly 80% of our corn crop being utilized for value-added agriculture. Our goal of agriculture is to create value at home, not put corn or soybeans on barges and ship them to China. I'd just soon China go hungry myself. So, we're making incredible progress, and so this is gigantic. There's no other state. Politics have gotten in the way in the other places, so we're really excited about that. That's obviously going to take a lot of electricity to make that happen as well, but in Nebraska, we're about food, fuel, and electricity, and we're really excited about the value that'll create.
So Nebraska powered by corn.
Nebraska, believe it, it's hard, in my lifetime it was food, and now we are fueled by corn, and we will even be able to expand that. We've got a task force to protect our aquifer, water quantity, quality, and we'll be able to even irrigate more. Nebraska used to be the dry plain. Nobody ever thought you could raise anything. We irrigate now 11 million acres, the most of anyone, and we're doing it maintaining our aquifer level. The Sandhills, 25% of our state, the Sandhills, it's a gigantic sponge, so we have the largest, most sustainable underground aquifer in the Western Hemisphere. There's extraordinary value and opportunity, not only make for Nebraska, but for our country. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, Mark, what innovation are you seeing in Wyoming?
Yeah, well, and thanks, Greg. Taking advantage of, just before I get there, taking advantage of the fact we have feds in the room, and hopefully some coal companies too. And I know you just worked hard on the lease, and then, so two things. We need to get coal leasing out there, and coal companies need to bid more than it costs for a new haul truck for those leases, because that future is really bright, and we need to make sure we have that. We just went through an administration that we all remember. They said, oh, it's 40 years of coal, we don't need to worry about it. We need to worry about it because there's so much that's coming on. For us, we're obviously nuclear is exciting new technology. We're excited about all the other things that are happening. But I will tell you that Wyoming's about to release, well, we have released, but a fully backed reserve stable token. It's a state stable token. We believe it will be a game changer in so many ways. North Dakota's got theirs right behind. You look at what's going on, some of the work here in Bozeman to be able to fractionalize cattle so young producers can now figure out how to actually buy cows on a place and maybe get a start. All of this digital horizon is incredible. I want to see it happen in this region of the country between Utah, Montana, Wyoming, maybe Colorado a little bit, New Mexico. These are good states, Nebraska, that really are going to lead the way on a real renaissance, I believe, of what we're going to see for the economy. Because just as you said, we can't say no, no, no. It took about 3 months to get everything ready and about a year and a half to build an aluminum smelter in Washington back during World War II. It took 8 years to get through scoping, and ultimately that terminal failed. That would have gotten our resources to places that know they don't have friendly neighbors, Japan, Taiwan, Korea. We need to make sure that we can get our resources there. And they are willing to help us with infrastructure, with payments, all of the things that can make our economy hum. So I think there's, again, incredible opportunities, Greg.
Great. So we have time for one or two questions. Who would like to ask a question? Yes, Gary.
This is questions for the governor of Puerto Rico, Ms. Colon. I have a lot of friends that live in Puerto Rico, and I hear all about your grid issues and power outages quite a bit. And these guys are over there, obviously, if you're a tax haven, as you probably well know. What I'm wondering about is, if you look geographically where Puerto Rico sits in the world, and LNG has become a huge factor in the state of Texas, Louisiana. We have LNG ports all over our state and growing dramatically. And we have cheap natural gas, where our oil and gas producers are selling gas for $3.50 an MCF, and it's going to Europe at $16 an MCF. So you would think that, when I hear about you burning diesel and burning fuel oil, which is the most expensive cost of energy in the world, and all these LNG tankers are going right by your country, headed to Europe. Why don't you build an LNG terminal? Use that money to build LNG. Then you can have natural gas. All these industries you talk about manufacturing need natural gas. You can be burning the cheapest fuel and also fuel your own economy with industry. So have you explored that at all?
Of course. And that's what we want. And we are on the same page. I was criticized during the campaign because I was the only one talking about using American LNG. How we are the main provider for many countries, and we cannot do that in a U.S. territory. When we were in Congress, Representative Ted Yoho from Florida invited me to Florida to do an LNG forum. And the law prohibited, at that time, American LNG to be transported to territories of the U.S. It's ridiculous, right? We amended the law. So now it can be done. And I can proudly say that this is the first time ever we acquired, a private company, Crowley, acquired American tanker to bring LNG to Puerto Rico, domestic, for the first time in more than 60 years. So I believe the other executive order of President Trump regarding chips and building chips in the U.S. are important to maintain that LNG facility. So in the case of Puerto Rico, I'm looking for two things. Switching that 62% of petroleum to LNG. And the second one is it's literally changing the operator of the transmission system. So I'm taking advantage of all the companies that are here that got experience dealing with transmission and distribution, because the one that we do have right now, even with the federal funds, they're not cutting even the vegetation for the transmission lines, even with waivers and with federal funds to do it. So yes, we are asking asking the federal government to let us use those funds to that. The prior administration never allowed that to happen because they wanted just solar panels. And we are investing. I just bought $750 million in batteries from Tesla. They have not arrived yet. I believe that we should, diversify our energy situation. But those 4 hours, they're going to help me just for 4 hours. They're not going to provide me steady and reliable electricity at a good price like LNG. So I'm 200% for that. And I hope the federal government in Washington can see that we can use better those federal dollars instead of small contracts for different communities to build the facilities that can help us to the future.
Jim, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I want to share that I think hopefully that everybody here just understands how important what we're all a part of and doing and the incredible urgency. I'll share what I've learned in the 3 years being the governor of Nebraska. I've gotten to be good friends with a guy named 4-star General Tony Cotton. He heads up Offutt Air Force Base. Offutt Air Force Base in Omaha is the home of strategic global nuclear deterrence. And I've learned from him about foreign adversaries and just how real it is. There's certainly a reason why Iran was bombed this last summer. And when you sit and learn, and there's some things that he's classified me with I can't share, but I will tell you that, I think of my grandpa, World War I veteran, when we started with electricity, and there's so much opportunity for business and for our states to grow. But if right now, when you start understanding how severely we've been duped by this last administration, that we can't do coal and that we are going to take 25 years for nuclear power, for God's sake. Our foreign adversaries are going crazy with nuclear power. They are doing coal plants in China every other week. Why is it so important? Data centers are important. Some say, I've just said, hey, we need a breath to catch up. But from data centers, it's artificial intelligence. It took me I can't believe I'm talking about it, but artificial intelligence, we have to win the electricity game. Because if we don't win artificial intelligence, and our foreign adversaries do. My view, democracy depends on it. When we talk about generations, Mark, we have to win. What we're doing is extraordinarily important, and we have to say no, we have to make things happen, because when I see what our military does, when I see what the strain in General Cotton's face and how our foreign adversaries are working together to beat us in nuclear deterrence, holy cow. We need AI, we need to win.
Yeah, so there's no question. I mean, this is more than just the urgency for the economy. It's an issue of national security. And Mark, you wanted to make a final comment?
Yeah, I wanted to say everybody in this room really can take something away here. If you're in Montana, you talked about export. Wyoming, we talk about export too. We've been blocked to the west by the West Coast. Some would call it the left coast. Governor Stitt from Oklahoma and I testified in front of Congress because here's poor little New Hampshire that is burning fuel oil when they could get natural gas, but they can't get it through New York, and they can't get electricity through Maine. Ned Lamont, another Democrat, saying, I need power because I need to do something to make sure my consumers have electricity. And he couldn't get gas through to get to Connecticut. This is stupid for our country. We need to figure out, we have energy abundance here, and we really need to make sure that we can share it.
So just in closing, there was a comment made earlier by Aaron from Escalon about the entrepreneur magnet. This is a tax policy that Montana adopted in 2021. It wasn't explained earlier, so I just want to give you a quick description. What this says, it was a law that we initiated, I signed in 2021. If you establish a business in Montana and it's your legitimate headquarters and you put roots down here, if at some point you sell the business, there is zero tax on the sale of corporate stock. Our goal is to get entrepreneurial golden geese to fly here and lay golden W-2 eggs. Please thank my fellow governors for their contribution. And it's time for lunch.